The court of the eternal night shimmered under a ceiling of stars, carved into obsidian and lit by floating candelabras that bled silver fire. Violins moaned through the cold air as nobles in crimson velvet and bone-white silk danced like ghosts. Wine as thick as blood dripped from jeweled goblets. Whispers crawled along the marble walls like spiders. Then the doors groaned open. Chains scraped across the floor. Every head turned. They brought him in bound and shirtless, covered in bruises that had not faded. Tall as a shadow and wild as a storm, the werewolf stood with shoulders squared, golden eyes unflinching. His chest rose and fell like he could barely keep the beast beneath his skin. Black marks curled along his ribs, sigils meant to weaken him. But even in chains, he looked like something carved from the wild. A monster. Laughter broke the silence. Three sisters stepped down from their throne of thorns, moving like smoke. Lyra, with eyes like sharpened glass and a voice that cut deeper than any blade. Selene, with a cruel curve to her lips, her fingers always stained red from some recent sin. And Marilyn, the youngest, the most dangerous, beautiful like drowning, her steps in rhythm with hearts breaking. They circled him as the crowd watched in silence. Lyra's voice dripped venom as she leaned in close. "This is the beast the king dragged from the swamps. It smells like burnt pine and wet fur." Kale's golden eyes flicked to her. One heartbeat passed. Another. Then, without a word, he smiled, slow and dangerous, like he knew something none of them did. "You mock what you fear," he said, voice deep as thunder, quiet as death. Lyra flinched, just for a breath, just for a moment, but he saw it. The vampire king rose from his throne. He was old, older than stone and colder than time. His mouth twisted in amusement as he studied the scene below. "Then let the joke live," he said, his voice cracking across the hall like lightning. "Each of you shall marry him, 1 moon per sister. Let the beast show you what becomes of arrogance." Gasps fluttered through the room like dying moths. The sisters froze. Lyra's jaw clenched. Selene's eyes narrowed. Marilyn's lips parted as if she'd expected this, or hoped for it. Kale said nothing. He didn't need to. The chains fell from his wrists. No one moved, not even the guards. He walked past the king, past the sisters, past the gasping nobles. His steps were heavy, slow, but every muscle in him thrummed with leash power. He stopped in front of Lyra. She met his eyes, pretending not to tremble, pretending not to care. But he leaned closer, and when he spoke, it was not a threat. It was a promise. 1 moon, vampire. You'll forget how to laugh." He walked out of the court without looking back. Behind him, the violence had stopped. Behind him, the sisters stood frozen. And somewhere deep in the heart of the cursed woods, the wind began to howl. The night was heavy with fog, curling through the black trees like breath from a sleeping beast. Far from the vampire court, hidden deep in the cursed woods, stood a stone fortress older than the kingdom itself. Walls cracked by time, windows like hollow eyes, doors that groaned when opened. This was where he took her. Lyra stood on the threshold, her crimson cloak fluttering behind her like spilled wine. Her skin, pale as moonlight, shimmered with a cold, untouchable beauty. She walked like she'd owned the ground beneath her feet. But inside, she burned with rage. Rage at the king. Rage at Kale. Rage at herself for letting him get under her skin. He waited in the great hall, barefoot on the cold stone floor. His body towered above the broken hearth, scars crawling across his chest like old stories. He didn't bow, didn't speak, just stared at her, wild and calm all at once. "You live like a savage," she said, her voice sharp, her eyes colder than snow. "I live like something free," he answered. She stepped closer, but stopped when he did. A breath between them. Tension tight as a bowstring. "This isn't a marriage," she hissed. "It's a curse." He smiled, slow and hungry. Then we're both cursed. Days passed like storms. She wandered the fortress with disdain, but he was always there, watching, silent, impossible to ignore. He moved like a shadow that refused to leave. He was everywhere. When she read by the fire, he was sharpening his blades. When she bathed in the spring behind the keep, he was near, eyes in the trees, not touching, not speaking, just there. One night, Thunder cracked across the sky, and rain fell like 1,000 knives. Lara stood at the window, lightning painting her in silver light. Her gown clung to her like fog, her eyes lost in the storm. Behind her, the door creaked open. She didn't turn. Do you always stalk in silence? Only when the prey pretends not to notice, he said. She spun around, her fangs bared in warning, but his gaze pinned her in place. He stepped closer, slow, measured, like a predator savoring the moment before the strike. You're not like the others, he said, voice low and rough. You hide it better, but I see it. See what? The hunger. For a second, her breath caught. His hand reached out, not to grab, not to dominate, but to brush a lock of hair from her cheek. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but under it, she felt the heat of him, the danger, the power. She slapped his hand away. He didn't flinch, didn't growl, just looked at her like he knew the truth she wouldn't say aloud. You want to tame me, he whispered, but you're the one who's losing control. She left the room in silence, but that night she didn't sleep. Neither did he. In the days that followed, their words grew sharper, their silences louder. Their eyes met too often. When she passed him in the hall, her shoulder brushed his arm, just enough to feel the strength beneath his skin. When he hunted, she followed, silent, curious, unwilling to admit she was drawn to the way he moved, the way he owned the world around him. They hadn't touched, not really, but something was changing. She could feel it in her chest, and so could he. When the moon completed its cruel circle, Leora returned to the court, quiet, pale, and changed. She didn't speak of what happened in the cursed woods. Not a word. Her sisters watched her closely, like hawks circling a wounded creature. Celine saw the shadows under her eyes. Marilyn smelled the ghost of fire on her skin. They cornered her in the garden of thorns, where roses grew sharp as blades and the wind never whispered kindly. You fell for him, Celine said, her voice like ice cracking. Tell the truth. Lyra looked away, not in shame, but in fear of what the truth might mean. We made a pact, Celine reminded her. If one of us falls, the other two will end it. We will not be broken by a beast. He is more than a beast, Lyra whispered. That's the problem, Marilyn said softly, her eyes far too calm. The next night, Celine rode into the cursed woods. She wore no fear, only armor woven with spells and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. Unlike Leora, Celine did not intend to be tamed. She was fire under frost, hunger wrapped in silk, and she had one purpose, to make the werewolf kneel. Kale met her at the gate. He said nothing as she dismounted, just stared. The air around him vibrated with quiet warning. She walked past him, dragging her hand along his chest without permission, without care. You didn't break her, she said, smirking. But I'm not so fragile. He grabbed her wrist. Not roughly, not gently. His touch was firm, unshakable, like iron forged in moonlight. I don't break things, he said. I burn them clean. Celine's smile faltered, but only for a heartbeat. The days passed, slow and tense. They did not speak often. When they did, it was like blades clashing. She tried to mock him, taunt him, command him. But Kale was not a creature of court games. He didn't play. He hunted. When she wandered into the woods, he followed. Not to protect her, but because she was his now, and the forest knew it. He watched her try to control the fire he carried, and she watched him resist her charm, her magic, her beauty. Each night, their eyes met across the long table in the hall. Each night, neither of them blinked. But it was on the sixth night that everything changed. A scream broke through the trees, high and sharp. Celine ran toward it before thinking. Old instincts, old pride. She found a dying creature, a vampire scout, torn open by wild things from the forest, too weak to move, too stupid to stay out of cursed land. The beast returned. They circled. Fangs, yellow eyes, hunger. Celine stood her ground, ready to bleed. Then a growl shook the earth. Kale arrived like a storm. He didn't speak. He shifted. Not into a monster, but into something ancient, massive, silver-furred and golden-eyed. His roar cracked the night. He tore through the pack. No mercy, no hesitation. Blood soaked the roots. Silence followed. He shifted back. Bare, covered in wounds, breath heavy, but eyes still locked on her. She stared at him, shaken. Why? She asked. He looked at her like it was the dumbest question in the world. Because you're mine, for now. He turned and walked away. But Celine didn't move. Because in that moment, something inside her shifted too. Days in the fortress passed like smoke through clenched fists. Never still, never soft. Celine prowled the halls in silence, her steps as sharp as her thoughts. She was used to power, to control, to bending the will of men and monsters alike. But Kale did not bend. He did not flatter. He did not even flinch. He watched her like a storm watches the sea, ready to rise, ready to crash. He didn't speak unless he meant it. He didn't touch unless he chose to. But when he looked at her, she felt like a flame beneath his gaze, hot, flickering, unsure if she would burn or be burned. One evening, rain kissed the stones outside, soft and endless. Celine sat by the fire, pretending to read, pretending not to care. Kale stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes lost in the storm. Tell me, she said, without looking up, do you ever miss pretending to be human? He didn't answer at first. The silence stretched. I never pretended, he said. I survived. She closed the book. Surviving isn't living. His voice dropped. And mocking isn't power. Her eyes snapped up to his. The tension between them flared again. No fire, no fury, just something heavy, coiled, waiting. You think you figured me out, she said. No, he replied. I think you're trying not to figure yourself out. She stood, moving slowly, like a blade being drawn. You think I'm weak because I wear silk and speak sharp. No, he said, stepping toward her. I think you're terrified of being soft. They were close now. Too close. Her heartbeat, silent for centuries, fluttered. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust. It was something colder and deeper, something primal. What do you see when you look at me? She asked. He didn't blink. I see a woman who wants to feel, but only if it doesn't leave a mark. His hand lifted, almost touching her cheek, but stopped an inch away. And I, he said, voice like smoke, always leave marks. Her breath caught. Then she stepped back. I'm not Leora, she said. I know. I'm not going to fall in love with a beast. I know. But that night, she didn't sleep. She watched the fire until it died. She remembered the look in his eyes. She remembered the scent of blood in the rain. She remembered how he had fought for her without asking, without expecting anything in return. He was the only creature who had never tried to own her, and that made her want him more than anyone else ever had. In the morning, she found him outside, sharpening a blade beneath a dead tree. He didn't look up. Tell me about your pack, she said. He did, quietly. About brothers lost, about battles fought beneath red moons. He told her of betrayals, of hunger, of how the vampires hunted them like animals. She listened, truly listened. And when he was done, she touched his hand. Not to control, not to seduce. Just to say, I see you. For once he let her. That night, they sat by the fire, not speaking. And for the first time in Celine's long, cursed life, she felt safe in silence. The third moon rose red over the forest, casting long shadows through the mist. Leora stayed silent. Celine watched the fire too long. Neither spoke of what they felt, what they feared, what they almost couldn't leave behind. But Marilyn, she smiled. She was always smiling. Her beauty was colder than death and softer than silk. Her voice could make kings beg, and her silence could break hearts. She didn't walk. She glided, like fog over frozen water. But beneath that still grace was something dark, something deeper than her sisters had ever dared to feel. When she arrived at the fortress, Kale was waiting. He leaned against the old gate, arms crossed, shirt open to the wind. Moonlight kissed the scars on his chest and the wild in his eyes. He didn't speak. Neither did she. They stood in silence, both of them unbothered by time. Then she laughed, a soft, amused sound that felt like ice cracking. They warned me, she said, stepping closer. They told me not to fall. He watched her without blinking. Then why are you here? To see if falling hurts. He opened the door. She stepped inside. From the start, Marilyn did not resist him. Not like the others. She didn't mock. She didn't challenge. She didn't pretend not to want something. And that made her more dangerous than both. Cale sensed it. The way she moved, the way her eyes lingered too long, the way her lips always looked like they were holding back a secret or a spell. She never raised her voice, never asked questions. But every word she spoke slid under his skin like a blade wrapped in silk. "You act like you're in control," he said one night. "Because I am," she whispered. She came to him without fear, sat across from him by the fire, walked beside him through the cursed woods, stood near him on the tower in the rain. And never once did she flinch, not at his growl, not at his rage, not even when his eyes glowed gold beneath the full moon. "You don't fear me," he said. "Fear is a song I stopped dancing to long ago." But there was something else in her, beneath the beauty, beneath the charm. Grief. A deep, endless well of it. Cale caught her once, alone in the cold garden behind the keep, staring at the broken statue of a wolf, her back to him, her voice so quiet it nearly vanished into the night. "When I was human," she said, "I used to dream of running free. Now all I do is watch others bleed for me." He stepped behind her, not touching, just close. "Then stop watching," he said. "Run with me instead." Her smile returned, smaller this time, softer. "What if I'm too far gone?" He leaned in, his breath brushing her neck, his voice low, wild, certain. "Then let me bring you back." That night, the wind outside howled louder than ever. Inside, they sat together on the floor near the fire. Her head rested against his chest. His arms held her like he wasn't sure whether to protect her or claim her. But he knew one thing. She was his. And for the first time in her long, cursed life, she wanted to belong to something real. The three sisters returned to the vampire court, changed, quiet, haunted by what they would not admit. They stood before the vampire king beneath the spire of black glass, their gowns shining like frost under moonlight, their faces calm masks hiding chaos beneath. The court was silent, waiting, watching. The king's voice broke the hush. "Did he break you?" Leora's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "No." "Did he tame you?" Celine's eyes narrowed. "He did not try." "Did he touch your hearts?" Marilyn spoke last, voice soft as snow. "He reminded us we still have them." The king's mouth curled in anger, not rage, but something deeper, something old. He stood slowly, robes trailing behind him like smoke. "You were meant to bring him to his knees. Instead, you returned like girls dreaming of fire." "We did not dream," Leora said. "We woke up." His eyes turned black. "You were born to rule, not to be ruled. I gave you power. And now you kneel to a beast." "We knelt to no one," Celine said, stepping forward. "He is not a beast. He is a king made by pain, not by throne." "And pain," Marilyn added, "recognizes pain." The court stirred with whispers. Fear. Fascination. The king raised his hand. The room fell dead quiet. "Then he must die." The sisters stiffened. "If he has touched your hearts, then he has cursed you. If he lives, you will forget who you are. So I will break the curse with fire." He turned to the war priest beside him. "Send word to the Black Knights. The werewolf dies by the next moonrise." "No," Leora breathed. But the words were already spoken, and the hunt had begun. Meanwhile, in the cursed woods, Cale felt the change. Not in the wind, not in the ground, but in his chest. Something was wrong. He stood alone on the cliff above the valley, eyes glowing gold in the rising dark. The scent of ash rode the air. The birds had vanished. Even the wolves below howled in uneasy silence. They were coming. He didn't fear death. He had danced with it too many times. But when he thought of Leora's quiet strength, Celine's hidden fire, Marilyn's broken grace, something old stirred in him. Not rage, not instinct. Something worse. Hope. He turned back to the fortress. The halls were quiet, the fire still warm. He touched the place on the wall where Marilyn had drawn a flower in dust. He stared at the old blade Celine had sharpened with him. He found the book Leora had left open, still unfinished. his home, their echo. He bared his teeth. They would not take this from him. Not again. That night, the moon rose behind clouds. Black knights rode through the woods like shadows with burning swords. Their armor was kissed by blood spells. Their hearts sworn to the king. They came not to capture, but to kill. But Kale did not hide. He waited by the ancient stone gate, shirtless, barefooted, scars bright in the torchlight. The wolves gathered behind him, not tame, not trained. His brothers, his last pack. He looked toward the distant mountains, where he knew the vampire court glowed like a wound. He whispered one word, "Come." And then, as the black knights closed in, Kale let go. The beast rose. The black knights fell like thunder. They came with silver and fire, with blades forged in vampire curses and armor sealed with death. But Kale met them with fury older than kings. His growl shook the trees. His claws split steel. The wolves moved with him, not as beasts, but as brothers. Blood soaked the stone. Screams tore the night apart. Yet Kale stood alone at the gate, the last line between death and the home he had carved from pain. His breath came heavy, wounds bled freely, but his eyes, burning gold, never wavered. Then, from the shadows beyond the flames, he saw her. Marilyn. She moved like a whisper between worlds, her black dress untouched by the smoke, her pale skin glowing with moonlight. Behind her came Lyra and Celine, side by side, their faces cold, their hearts burning. The three vampire sisters had returned to the forest they once mocked. This time, not to tame the wolf, but to stand with him. Kale's eyes locked with Marilyn's. No words passed between them. They didn't need them. She walked straight into the chaos. A knight raised his blade toward her. Before he struck, Celine's hand flashed. A shard of ice pierced his throat. He dropped without a sound. Lyra vanished and reappeared behind another, her dagger slicing clean through the gap in his helm. Marilyn moved like a ghost, untouched, unseen, until she stood beside Kale. He stared at her, blood dripping from his jaw. "Why did you come back?" he asked. She raised her hand and touched his cheek, unbothered by the blood. "Because you're mine, and I protect what's mine." His breath hitched, not from pain, but from the way she said it. She turned to face the knights. Her eyes glowed red. "Fall back," she commanded. "You are not fighting a beast. You are fighting a bloodline older than your king." They hesitated, just for a moment. And in war, a moment is death. The wolves surged forward again. Celine led the charge, blade in each hand, eyes burning like stars falling. Lyra moved behind the lines, fast and silent, cutting the enemy down before they even saw her. Kale and Marilyn stood back to back. He fought like fury. She fought like fate. His claws ripped armor. Her magic turned blades to dust. The nights began to break, and still the moon climbed higher. Then the final knight stepped forward, not like the others. Taller, darker, older. He removed his helm. The vampire king had come. His gaze swept over his daughters, his betrayers. His face was calm, but his voice shook the world. "You stand with him? A wolf, a curse?" Lyra stepped forward. "You made us curses long ago." Celine joined her. "You ruled with fear. He leads with fire." Marilyn's voice was the last, cold and soft. "We choose him, not because he is perfect, but because he does not lie about his hunger." The king raised his sword. "Then die with him." Kale bared his teeth. "We won't die tonight." And with that, they charged. The king met them not as a father, but as a god of ruin. And the forest became a grave for everything there was. The forest burned, not with fire, but with the light of something ending, something ancient and unforgiving. Kale stood over the vampire king's broken body, blood steaming on his chest, eyes still glowing beneath the falling ash. Around him, the wolves circled in silence. Lyra knelt in the grass, her blades lowered. Celine leaned on a shattered spear, breath thin, arm torn open. Marilyn stood in the center of it all, untouched, quiet, her face pale with something close to sorrow. The king was dead. The curse was broken. But the air held no joy, only stillness. Kale looked down at the fallen crown near his feet. It was cold, black, useless now. He did not reach for it. This was never about a throne, he said, voice like gravel and storm. Marilyn stepped toward him, slow and steady. Her dress was torn, her hair wild, her lips red as blood in silence. She stopped in front of him, eyes never leaving his. Then what was it about? She asked. He reached up and touched her cheek, his hand shaking, just a little. It was about you. She closed her eyes. His voice softened. You standing here, not as something to be tamed, not as a queen, but as a woman who chose me when she didn't have to. Behind them, the sisters watched with quiet eyes. No judgment, no mockery. They had seen death. They had seen truth. And they had seen what love looked like when it bled for something real. Marilyn opened her eyes. They shimmered, not with tears, but with something deeper. Then let me choose again. She reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a ring, silver, carved with ancient runes. A binding vow, she said, made from my first blood, worn only once, never undone. Kale looked at it, not with fear, not with pride, but with something close to reverence. What happens if I wear it? You become part of me, forever, even in death. He took the ring, slid it onto his finger, and the ground beneath them trembled, not with danger, but with promise. The skies above split with thunder. Moonlight poured down like silver fire. The forest stilled. Time stopped. Kale pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. Then let the world try to tear us apart. They will, she whispered. I know. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the war, not the curse, not the blood in their veins. Just the hunger in their hearts, and the vow they had made beneath ash and moon. Days later, the fortress stood quiet again. Wolves guarded the gates. Flowers bloomed where blood once fell. The sisters took no throne, but they ruled still, from shadow and silence. Kale and Marilyn were never seen apart again. Some say they wandered the edges of the world, half beast, half magic, half myth. Some say they vanished into the wild, where no king could reach, and some whisper that they still live, bound not by time, but by the fire they found in each other. A fire that did not burn to destroy, but to begin.